Okay, good morning everyone. Welcome to another video lesson in science. Now, in this video lesson, we're going to talk about the different concepts involved in your learning activity sheet for week 3 and 4. Now, for this week, your learning activity sheet is entitled The Arrangement of and Motion of Particles. Okay, let's begin with reading our objectives. So in this video lesson, our objectives are the following. Describe the different processes involved in phase change. Number 2, discuss what happens to the motion and arrangement of particles during phase change. Okay, let's continue. Okay. Before we proceed to our main topic in this video lesson, let us first read these questions that I have posted in here. These questions are basically guide questions that we will try to answer as we go on with our discussion. Okay. Number 1, what happens when solid turns into liquid? When liquid turns into gas and when gas turns into solid. What do you think kaya happens to the particles of objects undergoing changes from solid to liquid, from liquid to gas, and from gas to solid? For example, yung water. Water is a special substance found in our planet. Bakit siya special? Kasi uh, it is can be found in different phases of matter without changing its properties. Okay? Meron tayong solid water na ang tawag natin ay ice. Meron tayong liquid water na ang tawag natin ay simply water or liquid water. Meron tayong water in a gaseous state or in a gas or so that's what I mean, water in a gaseous state, which we call water vapor. Okay? Now, what do you think kaya happens to the particles when water turns into liquid, turns into gas, and turns into solid occasionally, especially in the water cycle? Okay? Another one, can solid turn into gas without the passing the liquid state, or can gas turn into solid and liquid? Yung solid ba, pwede ba siyang maging gaseous substances na hindi siya dumadaan sa pagiging liquid? Meron ba kayong mga materials na ganon? Okay? Alam ko meron kayong alam yan. Yung mga nilalagay natin sa damitan. Okay? Sa mga cabinet, yung mothballs. How does the mothball, what is the process involved when mothball turn from solid to gas? Yung albatross din sa CR. What is the process involved when albatross turns into gas? Ba? Kaya naman, can gas turns to solid and liquid? Yung gas ba, yung water vapor, pwede ba siyang maging solid and liquid? Ano na yung tawag natin? And what is the process involved? And lastly, why do phase changes happen? Okay, mali yung ang pagkakasulat dito. Bakit kaya nangyayari yung phase change? Okay. So basically, these are the questions that we will try to answer as we discuss the different concepts pertaining to phase change. Okay, let's continue. Okay, before we proceed to different processes involved in phase change, let us first define what phase change is. Okay, class, when we say phase change, it is the process when an object from a different phase of matter turn into another phase of matter. Okay, I repeat, phase change happen when one object transform from one phase of matter to another phase of matter. Kapag ang object naging from solid naging liquid, phase change ang tawag natin. May nangyaring phase change doon. Kapag ang liquid naging solid, may nangyaring phase change doon. Okay? Now, we have different processes involved in phase change. We have, cited in here, we have melting, we have freezing, we have evaporation, we have sublimation, and we have deposition. Okay? Now, let us take them one by one. Let us discuss them one by one. Okay? I have here an illustration. Okay? Dito sa may parte ng frame na to, we have a liquid water in here. Okay? So, solid, ice, liquid water, the liquid water, yung iniinom natin, and then gas, the water, vapor. Okay. Let us have the phase change involving water as an example. Okay. Let us have melting. So, from the illustration, we see that melting happens when solid becomes or turns into liquid. Okay? So, again, pag sinabi nating melting, when we say melting, it happens when solid object transform into liquid object. And the point of temperature kung saan ang solid object ay naging liquid, we call it as melting point. Okay? Again, when we say melting, it is the process when a solid object turns into liquid. And the point of temperature or in temperature wherein solid object turns into liquid, we call it as melting point. Okay? Another process, we have freezing. Yung freezing naman, kabaliktaran siya ng melting. Freezing happens when liquid turns into solid. And the point of temperature wherein yung uh, water naging solid, ang tawag natin doon is freezing point. Okay, again, freezing point is the point in temperature wherein or when liquid substances or when liquid object turns into solid. Freezing point ang tawag natin dyan. Okay, next we have evaporation. Evaporation, based from our illustration, it happens when solid object or substances turns into gas. For example, nagpakulo tayo ng tubig, we eventually see steam. Okay? Yung steam na yon, yun yung state ng water or phase ng water in gaseous form. Okay? So, ang tawag natin sa process na yon is vaporization or evaporation. Again, evaporation or vaporization happens when liquid turn into gas. Okay? Now, we also have sublimation. Sorry, ito naman na condensation muna. Kabaliktaran ng evaporation or vaporization, we have condensation. Condensation happens when gas naman turns into liquid. Okay? Diba? If you are heating water inside a kettle, okay? Maliban doon sa steam na lumalabas sa butas ng takip ng ating kettle, may makikita tayo sa baba na mga water droplets na bumababa, okay? In that case, yung water vapor, since natatrap sila sa loob, tumatama sila sa takip ng kettle natin, they cool down and from gases, they become liquid. Ang tawag natin doon is condensation. Okay? Now, let us move on to sublimation. Ang sublimation naman happens when solid becomes gases. Yung mga mothballs, yung mga albatros natin, nawawala na lang bigla, pero aamoy natin kasi they undergone process of sublimation. Sublimation again happens when solid becomes gases. Kabaliktaran ng sublimation, we have the deposition. Okay? Deposition happens when gases turns into liquid. Okay? So those are the processes involved in phase change. We have melting, freezing, evaporation, sublimation, and deposition. Okay, now let us come to this one. What happens during phase change? Especially on the motion and the arrangement, which is the title of your learning activity of the particles inside an object or matter. Okay, again, what happens to the particles, especially its motion and arrangement, when a matter undergoes changes, okay, or undergo phase change, okay? Sabi dito, during phase change, heat energy is either absorbed or released. Sabi dito, sa Tagalog, kapag nagkakaroon daw ng transformation from one phase to another, ang heat energy or simply the heat, it can either be pwede siyang ma-absorb or pwede siyang ma-release. Ano ang mangyayari kapag ang heat energy is absorbed? Heat energy is released as the molecules slow down. Okay, kapag ang heat energy na release, ang mangyayari sa molecule natin, mag-slow down sila. Kasi sabi natin, if you will remember, in our previous video lesson, that the particles inside an object are constantly moving. Kaya lang sa solid, ang movement niya is very limited. The particles of a solid object vibrates on at its position. Sa mga liquid naman, they are far apart na nagsislide sila over one another. Lalo-lalo na sa gases, they are very far from each other and they are free to move. Kaya really, particles in an object are really moving. Now, Kapag yung heat na release, yung mga particles na yon nagsuslow down. For example, pag yung gas na nag-release siya ng heat, okay, yung particles ng gas mag-slow down. Okay? Yan, alamin natin kung ano nangyayari sa tubig. Okay? Mamaya papaliwanag ko. And how about naman to the arrangement of the molecules or the particles? Okay? When energy is released, nag-slow down na yung mga particle, yung arrangement nila, they move closer to each or to one another. Whereas naman, kabaliktaran siya kapag yung heat energy is absorbed, ang mga molecules nag-speed up at nag-move far from each other, kaya nag-expand yung object natin. Okay? Simply put it in a very common scenario. Kapag gutom ka na, okay, yung energy mo na-release mo na, what is your tendency? Your tendency is to slow down. Okay? And kapag busog na busog ka or very much nakakain ka, kumpleto yung tulog mo, okay? Let's say it is in terms of energy, okay? Kapag na-absorb mo yung pagkain, yung tulog mo, okay? What will you be likely? Ano yung pwedeng mangyari sa iyo? You will become energetic. Kaya if you are a molecule, you tend to speed up. Or if you are a particle, you tend to speed up. Okay? So balikan natin yung process ng phase change. Okay? Okay, dito. Dito na lang, tingnan natin. Hindi na pala pwedeng bumalik. Okay? Okay, let us take this illustration and determine the motion of its particle as well as their arrangement once they undergo phase change. Okay. When solid turns into liquid, okay, ulitin ko. When solid turns into liquid, makikita natin na kulay pula. Ang ibig sabihin ng kulay pulang araw, the energy is absorbed. Okay? Yung solid, tingnan natin muna yung particles arrangement. Yung solid object, yung particle arrangement niya, they are tightly packed. Now, since nag-absorb siya ng energy, ano nga ang mangyayari sa mga object kapag nag-absorb ng energy? They will start to move apart. Kaya naman, yung solid na siyang liquid. Okay? Now, let us come naman to the motion of the object. So, solid particles, ang motion ng object is very limited. They vibrate in their own position. Now, since they undergo melting, and sa process ng melting, nagkaroon ng energy absorption, the heat is absorbed. Okay? Therefore, yung mga particles niya may energize and they will speed up. Kaya kung i-compare niyo yung liquid, di ba, mas free moving ang mga liquid particles kumpara sa solid particles. Okay? Yan. So sa solid, ang nangyayari is heat energy absorbed or released. From solid to liquid, ang heat energy is absorbed. What happens to the motion of the molecules? From solid to liquid, ang motion ng molecule nag-speed up. What happens to the arrangement? From solid to liquid, ang arrangement ng mga particles nag-start to loose. Okay? Nagkakaroon na ng space in between particles. Okay. Now, let us move on to vaporization. Yung mga pula muna yung unahin natin. In vaporization naman, pulang araw, it signifies that heat energy is absorbed during the process of vaporization. Compare natin yung particles ng gas at ng solid in terms of arrangement. Alin ang mas tightly packed? Alin ang mas closer together? It is the particles of the liquid object or the liquid water kumpara sa mga particles ng gaseous water or water vapor which are freely moving. Okay? Now in the process, yung heat energy is absorbed. Okay? Sinabi ko kanina. Heat energy is absorbed, kaya naman, ano ang mangyayari na? Yung mga particles, they will become very far from each other in terms of their arrangement. In terms of their motion, the particles now are much more freely moving than the particles of liquid. Bakit? Kasi yung heat energy is absorbed during the process of vaporization or evaporation. So again, in evaporation or vaporization, what happens to the heat energy? Is it absorbed or is it released? It is absorbed. Now, what happens to the motion of the molecules? Does it speed up or does it slow down? It speeds up. What happens to the arrangement of particles? Naging tightly packed pa ba sila or nag-spread sila from each other? They spread or move apart from each other. Okay? Yan. Tandaan ninyo ha, once an energy is released, once an energy is absorbed, yung motion, nag-speed up yung mga particle in terms of motion and they move apart from each other in terms of their arrangement. Okay, now let us move on to sublimation. Sublimation also involves heat absorption during the process. So in the process of sublimation, the heat is absorbed. Now what happens to the arrangement of the molecule? From tightly packed molecules, since na-absorb yung heat, therefore yung mga molecules niya will start to lose part or to move farther from each other. Kaya mas farther from each other ang particle ng gas kumpara sa solid. What happens naman to the motion of particles? Does it speed up or does it slow down? The motion of particles speeds up. Okay? So yan. Sublimation yan. Okay, now let us move on naman to deposition, freezing, and condensation. Let us first have when liquid turns to solid or when liquid freezes. Now, kung makikita ninyo, ang arrow natin is blue. It signifies that the heat energy is released. So, anong nangyayari kapag na-release yung heat energy? Yung mga particles niya, mag-slow down at yung arrangement niya the particles will move closer together. Okay? So, from liquid, yung particles dito, they are freely moving, kaya lang mas freely pa rin yung gases, pero compared to solid, mas freely moving ang liquid. Now, since the energy is released, since the energy is released during the process of freezing, so yung mga molecule, yung mga particles nito, mawawalan sila ng energy. So, what happens to the motion of energy in freezing when the process of freezing happens? Nagsuslow down sila. Kaya from moving particles in liquid dito, nagmo-move na lang yung mga particle at their own position. Now, in terms of arrangement naman, from slightly farther apart from each other, since nag-release siya ng energy, so yung mga particles niya nag-move closer, kaya naging siyang solid. Okay? Again, freezing, ano nangyari sa heat energy? It is released. Ano nangyari sa motion of particles? It slows down. Ano nangyayari sa arrangement of particles from liquid to solid? They move closer together. Okay? Now, let us have naman condensation. Condensation, kung makikita natin yung arrow, color blue din. Ibig sabihin, this process involves the release of energy. Kumpara natin yung movement of particles sa gas tapos sa liquid. Alin yung mas freely moving? Siyempre, sa gas. How about the arrangement of particles? Alin yung very far from each other? It is the gas. Now, since the energy is released, so ang tendency ng mga particle na ito is mag-slow down. Kaya from gas, naging siya liquid. From very freely moving to slightly moving. And what happens to the arrangement of molecules? From very far from each other, they now start to move closer together. And kapag nag-release pa siya nag-release energy, yung gas natin, magiging liquid, nag-release ng energy, magiging siyang solid. Just like what happens to water. Okay. Deposition naman tayo. Ang deposition naman, kung makikita natin sa arrow, it is also signified by color blue. Therefore, it is a process that involves energy release. Okay? So, in terms of motion, alin yung mga freely moving na mga particles? Siyempre, sa gases. Alin yung mga, in terms of arrangement, alin yung mga very far from each other, from one another. Siyempre, particles ng gases. So, when deposition happens, the energy is released. Therefore, the particles slows down, relatively, greatly slow down, and up to the point that they will just move at their own position. Vibration na lang sa kanilang position. Okay? And also, in terms of arrangement, from very loose arrangement, wherein particles are freely moving, from very loose arrangement, the energy is released and they start to move relatively or greatly closer to each other. Okay, so that's what happens to the particles of matter in terms of their arrangement and motion during phase changes. Tatandaan niyo lang na kapag ang energy is na-release in the process, the tendency of the particle is to slow down kasi nawalan sila ng energy. Okay? And move closer together. But, if the process involves energy absorption, nag-absorb ng energy, ang tendency ng particle is to speed up and move farther from each other or expand. Okay? Yung volume. Lumalaki yung volume. Okay? So, ano yung mga process na nag-involve ng release of energy? We have deposition, condensation, and freezing. Ano naman yung mga processes na nag-involve ng absorption of energy? We have sublimation, evaporation of vaporization, and melting. Okay? So I hope that one is clear to you. Now let us move on to your learning activity sheet. Okay, simple lang yung learning activity sheet ninyo. In activity 1, you are just you will just identify kung ano yung nag-change sa mga picture na nakalagay dyan. Then ways to change physically. Identify nyo either cutting, bending, breaking, grinding, so on and so forth. In activity 2 naman, you're going to identify the phase of matter in each container. And what will happen to the water molecules kapag yung heat is ginawa natin continuously. Pinaliwanag na natin kanina. Anong mangyayari kapag nag-apply ka ng heat sa water container A, sa B, sa C? Yan. Anong mangyayari doon? Energy release or energy absorption? Alright, now for this activity 3, it is entitled Heating Core for the Conversion of Ice to Water. Okay. We have different statement in here showing the different processes involved. We have liquid water absorbs heat, gaseous water absorbs heat, solid water absorbs heat. Okay? Example, meron ng sample dito. Stage 1 na nangyari, yung solid water nag-absorb ng heat, ang tawag natin doon is melting. Ano naman yung sunod? Yan. Dito kayo pipili sa taas. Okay? So, I hope this video lesson will help you accomplishing your learning activity sheet for this week. Okay? And see you in another video lesson.